HQN Books and Harper Audio are proud to bring you Herons Landing by Joann Ross, performed by Ashley Klanac. Chapter 1. Seth Harper was spending a Sunday spring afternoon detailing his wife's rally red Honda Civic when he learned that she'd been killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. Despite the Pacific Northwest's reputation for unrelenting rain, the sun was shining so brightly that the Army notification officers, a man and a woman in dark blue uniforms and black shoes spit-shined to a mirror gloss, had been wearing shades. Or maybe, Seth considered, as they'd approached the driveway in what appeared to be slow motion, they would have worn them anyway. Like armor, providing emotional distance from the poor bastard whose life they were about to blow to smithereens. At the one survivor grief meeting he'd later attended, only to get his fretting mother off his back, he'd heard stories from other spouses who'd experienced a sudden, painful jolt of loss before their official notice. Seth hadn't received any advance warning, which was why at first the officer's words had been an incomprehensible buzz in his ears, like distant radio static. Zoe couldn't be dead. His wife wasn't a combat soldier. She was an Army surgical nurse, working in a heavily protected military base hospital, who'd be returning to civilian life in 2 weeks. Seth still had a bunch of stuff on his homecoming punch list to do. After buffing the wax off the Civic's hood and shining up the chrome wheels, his next project was to paint the walls white in the nursery he'd added on to their folk Victorian cottage for the baby they'd be making. She'd begun talking a lot about baby stuff early in her deployment. Although Seth was as clueless as the average guy about a woman's mind, it didn't take Dr. Phil to realize that she was using the plan to start a family as a touchstone. Something to hang on to during their separation. In hours of Skype calls between Honeymoon Harbor and Kabul, they'd discuss the pros and cons of the various names on a list that had grown longer each time they'd talked. While the names remained up in the air, she had decided that whatever their baby's gender, the nursery should be a bright white to counter the Olympic Peninsula's gray skies. She'd also sent him links that he dutifully followed to Pinterest pages showing bright crib bedding, mobiles, and wooden name letters in primary crayon shades of blue, green, yellow, and red. Even as Seth had lobbied for Seattle Seahawk Navy and Action Green, he'd known that he'd end up giving his wife whatever she wanted. The same as he'd been doing since the day he fell head over heels in love with her back in middle school. Meanwhile, planning to get started on that baby-making as soon as she got back to Honeymoon Harbor, he'd built the nursery as a welcome home surprise. Then Zoe had arrived at SeaTac Airport in a flag-draped casket. In 2 years after the worst day of his life, the room remained unpainted behind a closed door Seth had never opened since. Mannion's Pub and Brewery was located on the street floor of a faded red brick building next to Honeymoon Harbor's ferry landing. The former salmon cannery had been one of the many buildings constructed after the devastating 1893 fire that had swept along the waterfront, burning down the original wood buildings. One of Seth's ancestors, Jacob Harper, had built the replacement in 1894 for the town's mayor and pub owner, Finn Mannion. Despite the inability of Washington authorities to keep Canadian alcohol from flooding into the state, the pub had been shuttered during Prohibition in the 1930s, effectively putting the Mannions out of the pub business until Quinn Mannion had returned home from Seattle and hired Harper Construction to reclaim the abandoned space. Although the old Victorian seaport town wouldn't swing into full tourist mode until Memorial Day, nearly every table was filled when Seth dropped in at the end of the day. He'd no sooner slid onto a stool at the end of the long wooden bar when Quinn, who'd been washing glasses in a sink, stuck a bottle of Shipwreck CDA in front of him.
Double cheddar bacon or Sample complete. Ready to continue?